Paul Walker was known around the world as the face of speed. To millions of fans, he would always be Brian O'Connor, the fearless undercover racer who helped turn street racing into a global phenomenon through the Fast and Furious franchise. His relaxed personality, genuine smile, and passion for cars made him one of Hollywood's most beloved stars. But after his tragic death in November 2013, the greatest surprise wasn't found on a movie set or hidden in a film archive. It was discovered behind the doors of a private garage that few people had ever seen. What family members, friends, and estate representatives uncovered inside revealed a side of Paul Walker that even many of his closest supporters never fully understood. Hidden from public view was an extraordinary collection of rare automobiles, unfinished projects, handwritten notes, and plans that painted a picture of a man whose love for cars ran far deeper than anyone imagined. When the garage was finally opened and catalogued, those present were stunned by the sheer scale of what they found. Row after row of carefully selected performance machines filled the space. There were more than 30 vehicles, many of them among the most sought-after collector cars in the world. Unlike many celebrity collections built for attention, Paul's garage reflected personal passion rather than status. He rarely showed off his cars publicly and never seemed interested in using them as symbols of wealth. Instead, each vehicle represented a story, a challenge, or a dream. Among the collection were multiple BMW M3 lightweights, extremely rare models built in limited numbers for performance enthusiasts. There were Ford GTs, Porsche 911s, classic muscle cars, and a Toyota Supra that reminded many fans of his most iconic movie role. Yet perhaps the most impressive vehicles were the Nissan Skyline GT-RS, legendary Japanese performance cars that had fascinated Paul for years. His Skyline collection revealed just how serious his obsession had become. Several examples had been imported from Japan and carefully modified with performance upgrades. Detailed records showed that Paul personally followed tuning changes and mechanical improvements. Some cars featured extensive modifications, while others had been preserved in near-original condition. These weren't simply expensive collectibles sitting untouched in storage. They were machines he actively studied, drove, and improved. Friends later recalled that Paul could spend hours discussing suspension geometry, engine tuning, and racing setups with the same enthusiasm that others reserved for major life events. For him, cars were not possessions. They were experiences. As inventory teams continued documenting the collection, another surprising discovery emerged. Many of the vehicles were not legally registered under Paul Walker's personal name. Instead, ownership records pointed toward Always Evolving, a motorsports company he co-founded with his close friend Roger Rodas. The company specialized in racing, tuning, and performance development, but it also served as a holding structure for numerous vehicles. This arrangement created significant complications after both Walker and Rodas lost their lives in the same tragic accident. Determining ownership became difficult, as some cars were connected to business accounts while others appeared to be partially owned through personal agreements. What seemed like a straightforward collection quickly became a complicated legal puzzle involving titles, valuations, and estate claims. The deeper investigators looked, the more fascinating the collection became. Several vehicles were discovered with paperwork related to Japanese import regulations. Some of Paul's prized Skyline GT-RS had entered the United States under special exemptions that allowed certain rare vehicles to be displayed despite not meeting standard federal requirements. These cars occupied a gray area of automotive law, making them difficult to register and insure. Yet Paul had pursued them anyway because of his admiration for their engineering. He wanted the cars exactly as they had been designed in Japan, preserving their originality and performance characteristics. The risks and complications involved only highlighted the depth of his dedication. Perhaps the most emotional discoveries were not the cars themselves but the personal items hidden inside them. As glove boxes, consoles, and storage compartments were opened, handwritten notes began appearing. Some contained tuning information, alignment settings, and performance observations. Others were far more personal. One note reportedly described the feeling of driving a Skyline at night, comparing the experience to flying. Another reminded whoever owned the car in the future never to sell it because of its rarity and significance. These simple messages transformed the vehicles from valuable assets into deeply personal pieces of Paul's life story. They revealed a man who formed genuine emotional connections with the machines he owned. Several unfinished projects added another layer to the story. Not every vehicle in the garage was polished and complete. Some sat partially disassembled, surrounded by tools and components. Wiring harnesses remained unfinished. Body panels leaned against walls waiting to be installed. Restoration plans covered workbenches. Friends recognized these projects immediately because they reflected Paul's hands-on approach to car culture. He wasn't satisfied simply buying finished vehicles. He enjoyed the process of building, improving, and restoring them. One project involved a classic Datsun 240Z that many believe was intended to become a future personal driver. Another restoration appeared destined as a gift for a close friend. These unfinished cars represented futures that would never be realized, making them among the most heartbreaking discoveries in the entire collection. Another unexpected revelation came from a group of vehicles marked with notes referencing Reach Out Worldwide, the disaster relief organization Paul founded in 2010. Several cars carried tags suggesting they were intended for future charity auctions or fundraising events. This discovery surprised many people because it showed that Paul had already begun planning ways to use parts of his collection to support humanitarian work. Reach Out Worldwide had become one of his greatest passions outside acting, deploying volunteers to disaster zones around the world. The idea that some of his prized vehicles were meant to help fund those efforts reflected the generosity that friends often described but that the public rarely saw. Even within his private garage, there was evidence that he was thinking about helping others. As the collection's value became clear, legal battles inevitably followed. Experts estimated the garage and its contents were worth well over $18 million. Determining ownership, settling claims, and distributing assets created years of complications. Eventually, a portion of the collection was sold at auction. In 2020, more than 20 vehicles associated with Paul's estate crossed the auction block, generating millions of dollars. Yet many important cars remained out of public view, reportedly retained by family members or transferred through private arrangements. For those who loved Paul, watching legal documents and financial disputes replace memories and passion was difficult. The collection had been built through years of enthusiasm and dedication, yet much of the public discussion focused solely on its monetary value. For Paul Walker's daughter Meadow and those closest to him, sorting through the garage became an intensely emotional experience. Every vehicle seemed to preserve a different part of his personality. His handwriting remained visible on notes and labels. Favorite tools sat where he had last used them. Partially completed projects waited silently for a builder who would never return. Friends described the experience as walking through his thoughts. It felt less like entering a storage facility and more like stepping into a frozen moment in time. The garage preserved not only what Paul owned but also what he cared about, what inspired him, and what he hoped to accomplish in the future. Ultimately, what people found in Paul Walker's garage was far more significant than a collection of rare automobiles. They discovered proof that the passion audiences saw on screen was entirely real. Paul wasn't pretending to love cars because it suited a movie role. He genuinely lived and breathed automotive culture. He studied it, invested in it, worked on it, and shared it with those around him. More importantly, the garage revealed a man who quietly combined that passion with generosity, humility, and purpose. Hidden among millions of dollars worth of machinery were plans to support charity work, unfinished gifts for friends, and personal notes that reflected gratitude rather than ego. In the end, the true legacy found behind those garage doors wasn't measured in horsepower or auction prices. It was the portrait of a man whose greatest passion became a bridge connecting performance, friendship, craftsmanship, and service to others. That is what truly stunned everyone who stepped inside, and why Paul Walker's garage remains one of the most fascinating and emotional discoveries in automotive history.